So we'd like to welcome Catherine Doyle to our Rotary E-Club of District 7710 program tonight. With her bio, she shared, from the moment I first saw capillary action take place in the xylem of a celery stalk, I became fascinated with plants and their impact on society and the natural world. As a child, my curiosity about science and how things operate persisted through countless science experiments in my family's kitchen. My passion for science and its influence on everyday life extends beyond the laboratory. I've worked in my family's cafe since my early teen years. As a result, I deeply share my parents' passion for feeding others. I'm an integral part of a foundation my family started called Feed the Firefighters. The foundation's mission is to feed emergency personnel when they miss meals as a result of an emergency event. Working at my family's cafe gave me a unique perspective on the impact of food demand and its effect on the economy at the retail level. I look back on those early experiences and see the origins of my passion for wanting to combine my science training with my desire to fight hunger at its source by improving crop production. I started my scientific career ranges from programming bacterial computers to solving math problems to studying carbon sequestration in Australian rainforests. Currently, I'm pursuing my PhD in plant and microbiology at North Carolina State University after being awarded a grant from National Science Foundation as a graduate fellow. Study DNA molecules that enhance disease symptoms and break resistance to Gemini viruses that cause major crop losses in cassava. Cassava, a large starchy tuber crop, is the largest crop produced in sub-Saharan Africa, feeding 200 million Africans daily. Everyone, please welcome Catherine Doyle.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be able to share some of the work that I've been doing and just my passion about the cassava crop. So I'm going to share my screen and show you some pictures that I have. So just bear with me with a moment. Should be coming up. So I'm going to talk about how cassava is a tool that can be used for the future of food security, not only in Africa, but in other places around the world. But mainly I'm going to focus on sub-Saharan Africa, where most of the work that I do is located at. So cassava, its Latin name is Manihot esculenta, and it is a large tuber crop, as you can see here on the left. And you can see how large the tubers get in this picture of the two people holding the cassava roots. But how it's mainly used is it's ground up into a flour, as you can see on the bottom right-hand corner. And it's also known as tapioca. And it's really important for farmers because it's their main staple food diet. But where it's grown is, it's not only grown in Africa, as you can see here on the map, but it's also grown in India, Asia, China, and areas of Thailand, as well as in South America. It has a lot of different uses. You can use the leaves to have like a green vegetable here, as you see on the top. A lot of times it's cut into chips and fried. That's how you mostly see it in South America. But it's really becoming popular in chips in Uganda and as well as other areas in Africa. When you grind up the tubers, you can produce a flour that many people turn into bread or cake. It also can be used as beer or as a biofuel. Also, something that's kind of a unique fact about it is that most of the glue that's in cardboard boxes is made out of cassava because it's a really sticky substance. That can be produced once you grind it up and add water through it. So why is it important in Africa? Well, it's mainly important because, as in the bio I mentioned, that it feeds about 200 million Africans daily. And the reason why it's a staple crop for small stakeholder farmers in Africa is because of the fact that it can grow in really poor soil conditions under high temperatures and during drought. And this makes it really useful because it means that if you experience a period in when there's no water or when the soil is really poor, and you can grow it just about anywhere that you would want to grow it. And it's also pretty important because of the fact that if, let's say, you have a conflict come through the region, because the tubers are mainly underground, that if the leaves above ground get destroyed, the tubers can still continue to grow from the stalks. And so you still are going to be able to have a source of food even if conflict comes through the region. And I was actually talking to one of the Peace Fellows that are currently here from Uganda, Patrick, about this, and how he was really pushing a lot of people to grow cassava where he was from because of the fact that it could be stable through conflict. And also it could be their major source of income and food for their family. But one of the biggest problems that cassava faces is the fact that it can be severely limited by disease and pests. So there's many viral diseases that affect cassava. And so in these two pictures here, so we have healthy tubers, and then we have ones that are affected by cassava mosaic disease, or CMD. And if you pay really close attention to the hands, you can see with the tubers that how large they are when they're healthy compared to when they're sick. So this basically devastates the yield that the farmers would get from their crop. And so it becomes a really big problem. And that's why a lot of research has been going into trying to fix this problem, to not only help the small stakeholder farmers to have food for them to feed, but also so when they can take their cassava to the market and sell it, they have food to pay for money to pay for other things that they need. And just to show you what it looks like on the leaf side, not just on the tuber side, this is a leaf that is healthy. You can see it's nice, bright, and green. But then when you see one that's infected, you see this yellowing, or what we call chlorosis. Also, the leaves will tend to shrivel. So the evidence of the disease is pretty evident pretty quickly during the infectious process. And one of the problems that we find is that, so cassava doesn't really come from seed. So they take cuttings. So basically they'll take a stalk and cut it into many different pieces, and then they plant it in the ground. So this is how the infection gets propagated through a whole entire field and also to a neighboring field. And so basically you could have a plant that looks healthy and you take a cutting of it, but it hasn't shown symptoms yet, or it's sick, and then you can infect your field and someone else's field just by sharing those cuttings. So what causes this disease? Well, it's caused by something called a Gemini virus. And a Gemini virus is a large family of plant DNA viruses that has two parts that are isohedral particles. We call them part A and part B. And together they allow the virus to be transmitted. And most of the Gemini viruses in cassava mosaic disease are transmitted by insects. In particular, cassava mosaic disease is transmitted by whiteflies. And we have a big concern for it because it causes a loss of many different crop species, as you can see here on the bottom, such as tomato or bean or cotton, and even maize. And it really undermines the food security. So why do we care about cassava? Bill and Melinda Gates put out a report in about 2013 that talked a lot about Christiana, which you can see here in the picture, with two of her sons. And what's interesting is Christiana is a farmer who farms cassava. It's her main source of food for her family and her two sons, as well as what she sells at the market to pay the bills and to send her sons to school. And cassava mosaic disease has come in, and it has basically eradicated her crop. So this is, first of all, not good because of the fact that now she has no food to eat. She has no food to feed her children, and therefore they become malnourished, and it has a limitation on their development, not only mentally, but physically. And also now she has nothing to sell at the market, and she can't pay for her sons to go to school. So it becomes kind of this circle pattern of where you cannot get out of this circle of not having food, not being able to buy any food, and then you basically have a circle of starvation. So kind of coming into what I work on is that there was a line of cassava that was developed that was resistant to cassava mosaic disease. But in the early 2000s, there was a pandemic that raged through sub-Saharan Africa, especially in Tanzania. And what they found is that this resistant line that you can see here in the image was no longer resistant, indicated by the infected leaf in the middle. And they knew that cassava mosaic disease recombines and undergoes reassortment. So basically it mutates at such a fast rate that when we introduce a cassava line or cassava crop that can be resistant, that the disease could overcome this resistance through evolutionary properties because of the fact that it can change so quickly. Well, one of our collaborators that I work with in Tanzania, Joseph Narandu, was doing this survey, and he found this resistant cultivar that was no longer resistant. And from that, he pulled 2 DNA molecules, which we call SEGs, or sequences that enhance Jimmy virus symptoms. And so I basically study those because I want to understand how they were able to break the resistance of this resistant cultivar. And hopefully by understanding how they broke resistance and how they operate, then we can find a sustainable solution to that. And in the next slide, I just wanted to show you kind of what happens when you work with these SEGs, or sequences that enhance Jimmy virus symptoms. So when you have A, C, and V here on the bottom, this is a plant, cassava plant, that's only infected with African cassava mosaic virus. But if you have the addition of these 2 DNA molecules that evolved to overcome resistance, they really do enhance infection. You can just see the more severe symptoms such as the yellowing and curling. And this is a really concerning because of the fact that the only crop that we have that's resistant to cassava mosaic disease is no longer resistant because of these DNA molecules. In addition, we found that they come from the cassava genome. And so basically it means that they're coming from the plant. And I've spent the past couple years working on this, and I'll spend my PhD also seeing how they interact and how they affect how the virus is evolving. So that's kind of what I have in terms of presentation, just kind of tell you about it. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Hi, I haven't said hello yet.
Hello.
Maybe I should turn on my video so you can see me. Hi.
Hi.
I'm not actually a member of the E-Club. I'm a member of the Durham Rotary.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, well, awesome. You are awesome. Thank you for your work. This is an excellent presentation. Really, really fine. And thank you so much for the work you're doing.
Oh, thank you. No, I look forward every day to get up to go to work because I know what I get to do and the impact that it can have.
Oh, yeah.
So, thank you.
It's really a very, it's an excellent presentation. And I thank you for bringing all of this to our attention because it's really important. And I think you have the questions of what is causing the disease and how can we out-strategize it, right?
Yes, yeah.
So I don't have a specific question. I guess maybe I'm interested in biodiversity and wondering if kind of putting different blends of cassava together, like so that they could, and then finding out what they do with each other, because you say this comes from the genome itself, but there's it's like the evolution is that the whatever the disease is always mutating to figure out how to cause a disease. but the cassava itself is going to continue to mutate to figure out how to stay well.
Right. Yeah. So basically, one concern is that every different type of cassava that we've evaluated has these DNA molecules. So so basically, we have not found one yet that doesn't have it. So there's no really opportunity to breed together that could have that. You also don't know if it would be dominant. So when you do breeding through cassava, it's possible that the segs would become dominant, and even when you did the breeding process, that you would still have a cultivar that still had the segs in it. Kind of what I'm switching my focus to do is to look at how the virus is evolving, and if you can figure out exactly how the virus is evolving and where the mutations occur, and then maybe we can stop it that way, because the plant will evolve to try to evade the virus, but the virus tends to be evolving faster.
Right.
And so that's what I'm going to look at a little bit more deeply in the next couple of years.
And one other question then, what about epigenetics? Have you done anything that thinks about how do you turn off those genome things that the virus likes?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. Yes, so one of the biggest hypotheses that we have is that the segs come from an environmental trigger, such as temperature increasing or humidity or drought. Because we know that with the presence of the virus that they're there, but there's something else going on that's causing them to come out as well. And I think it's temperature, and that's actually what my thesis is going to focus on for the next 5 years, is how is temperature affecting these molecules and the virus itself. So that's a really good question, and a lot of people are suspecting that, but there hasn't been much work done on it at all. So.
Right. And so if it's temperature that's turning on and off those epigenetic sort of signals, is there anything that mimics temperature that you could, I don't know, but anyway, I guess
you do that.
I don't know.
Yeah, so what you do is we have chambers here in Raleigh in the lab, and I can set the temperature to represent the global climate change that's supposed to over the next couple of years. So it's 3 degrees. So I'm going to test to see at different temperatures in 3-degree increments whether or not they're able to come out or not. And so you can grow cassava here with special permits in the United States.
Well, that's cool. And I've always loved tapioca.
Yes.
And I didn't know that it was from cassava. So that's pretty cool.
It is, yeah. It's the different names. I think also yucca is what they call it in South America. So a lot of times they're interchangeable.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your work.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, I had 2 questions for you.
Yes.
One is, how can you, is it just affecting the cassavas that are edible or cassavas that are poisonous? Because we have 2 types of cassavas.
Right.
Number 2 is, how is your work going to have an impact on the ordinary Tanzanians, the ones you're working with? And then number 3, how will your work, are you going to share your work with the Ministry of Agriculture in Tanzania on how to better their cassava production? Because I understand now in Africa, cassavas are basically known as poor man's food, and majority of the population doesn't consume cassavas at all. So how is your work going to have an impact on the population so that they can start consuming cassavas and replace it from corn?
Okay, so from what I know is that it does affect both varieties, the ones that are affected with cyanide, as well as the ones that are eaten more regularly. So every variety that I know of is affected by the disease. So that was your first question. Then the second question is, so there's an annual meeting. So the reason why this work really gets funded is because it has to be directly impacted by people who are in Africa, and it has to work with African scientists and African farmers. So the whole point is if we get money here in the United States, the money also has to be directly inputted into Africa, and they have to be a big contributors to the problem and also to the solution, because just us helping in the United States is not sufficient. So the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is really focuses on that. They also want people to really be educated on how to solve the problems in Africa themselves. But I'm going to a meeting actually next week where there's the annual diagnostic for cassava disease. And so it's a meeting only in Africa, and it's with people from all around the world that work just on cassava. And we'll be sharing stuff there. And then of course through publications, we'll also do that. And then because this grant is mainly funded by Bill and Melinda Gates, a lot of the information goes back to them, and then they can work on implementing some more practical solutions into the area. And then, yes, it is considered the poor man's crop, but I think, like you said, maize has started to take over. Cassava still is the largest crop grown in Africa from the recent census by the FAO as of last year, but I think you have to show that it's not going to be infected before people are going to really trust it to grow it more than what they have now. I think I answered all three.
Catherine, I had a question. This has been really, really interesting, and Melissa was kind of getting to my question a little bit too with the epigenetic piece, and I was just curious if there's a flip side to the vector possibly with the transmission through the insects. Is anyone looking into that, like on the other side of things? And you said it was insect transmitted through the insects, but does it cross plants directly? Like, is there like you know what I'm trying you know what I'm trying to say, but like
basically what happens is the whitefly will feed on the cassava plant. So this is the plant, it'll feed, and because the virus is inside the plant, when the stylus of the fly goes into the plant, it can pick up little particles where the virus is, and then it'll put them into its saliva, and then it can go to the next plant and feed on it, and then it can put the saliva back into that plant, and then the virus can be transmitted. So that's how it goes. Okay. And there are people looking at that. So in my lab, it's a big grant that they're working on with a bunch of different universities, and actually all these experiments have to be done in Africa because of the fact that they are with living organisms such as whiteflies. But we are looking to see how the virus is being moving through the whitefly and how it's changing as well. Because you can't just look at the plant because it is a vector-driven virus, so it is transmitted by whiteflies. You have to look at the whole picture to be able to find the solution. So that's a great question.
Do whiteflies do anything else besides are they known for any other disease transmission or any other problematic aspects of? I was just curious.
Whiteflies, I don't know of any other ones, but there might be. But there's a bunch of other insects that do the exact same thing. Like even for corn is one, and tomato and potato, and tobacco as well. There's a bunch that they affect, but they're different insects usually. So like trips or aphids.
Thank you.
Catherine, I have a question for you. Great presentation. I'm wondering why you need permit to grow that in U.S.
Yeah, because the U.S. Is concerned that if we grow it here and we introduce a virus to this plant, that if it got out into the rest outside of the lab, that it could spread. And so there's a lot of government regulation to make sure that doesn't happen. That's one reason why you can't give whiteflies onto an infected cassava plant in the U.S. is because if those whiteflies escape, and then because there's potential that these Jimmy viruses go to more than just one type of plant, that it could start affecting other crops here. And so that's why.
Thank you.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Is there a way to make the plant taste bad to the whiteflies? Or maybe smell bad so that they decide that they'd rather not eat it? Could they eat some kind of plant that we're not interested in harvesting and growing and eating ourselves. So that white flies still have something to eat, but they just decide that they'd prefer not to eat the kinds of things we like to eat because they smell bad.
Yeah, I think you could do that. I think there'd be a couple concerns with that. So first is, how do you know what they like and what they don't like? So we'd have to figure that out.
Yeah.
But if you knew that, I think there's a concern of genetic modification.
Right. Exactly.
And according to, in Africa, they don't want genetically modified organisms. And so there's a big push that we have to do things that are non-genetically modified to introduce into Africa. And so it wouldn't work sustainably to be able to have it, even if we were able to do it, which I'm sure you could if you figured out all the details. But I don't think people would want to eat it because it's kind of, it's much.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm happy to hear that Africa doesn't like genetically modified food, because they're a big continent and we need to have some place where there's still some ungenetically modified food. So that's good. So the other thing is that maybe you could just find things that the white flies don't like to eat, that they don't eat, and grow them in proximity of the foods we like to eat, and maybe it would happen naturally. I mean, so that's just an idea.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because that kind of stuff happens.
Yeah.
That's how biodiversity happens, I think, is that things are just close to each other and then things we've never even thought of happen.
No, that's true. I'm trying to think of
something that they don't like to eat.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. And if they like cassava more, how do you, I don't know exactly all the things about white flies because I mainly work with the plant. I'm just learning, but you could probably, I'm not so sure how it would work to answer your question.
No, exactly. So it's just an experiment. It's,
No.
If you could find something that white flies don't like, then you could just start growing it close to the cassava and see what happens. But the first thing would be to find something that white flies don't like.
Yeah, they don't really like certain types of tomato. I know that. But the problem is how do you do it when it's so widespread, the disease, and they fly in different areas? And so you'd have to have them on every field in every single place. And so that would be really hard to implement on a large scale.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking that the tomato, whatever it's in the tomato that's good, might actually mutate into the cassava so that the cassava developed naturally the ability to taste bad. But that, I mean, it's just a chance,
Yeah, no, it'd take a while, I would think, but it's possible.
Yeah.
But I'm not so sure. It would take a long time.
Sure. Yeah.
Great questions, Melissa. Thank you. Does anyone else have any, while we wait for anyone else who wants to ask additional questions, and you're also free to type them in the chat if you'd like someone else to say them for you. In the meantime, I wanted to, if you don't mind, Catherine, to ask a little bit about your restaurant and the foundation that your family has, if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, sure. So my family owns Barry's Cafe, and it is like a mom and pop's breakfast and lunch place in Cary, North Carolina. And basically in 1994, there was a major ice storm here in the Triangle. And my father got called by the fire department to come out and bring some coffee and biscuits. And he brought 30 biscuits and a gallon of coffee. And there ended up being over 300 people there. So obviously those 30 biscuits and a gallon of coffee was not going to feed 300 people. So all day he kept going back and forth, providing food and hot coffee during this ice storm. And after that event, he realized that there really wasn't a service that could provide emergency personnel when they were missing a meal, protecting people in the area or serving them. And so he decided that any time that they needed food or drinks, that he would come and provide it. So he started that in 1994, and I was born 2 years before that. So I think probably when I was around 6 or 8, I started going out with him to these events. And it really impacted me because I could see the need, and then I could see how just providing someone with food really made a big difference. And so the cafe, we have the foundation still going today, and we give 15% off to emergency personnel when they come in. But it's really impacted me a lot in seeing how just supplying food to others can have an impact on them. And then also through the cafe, you can see how the retail level, how having crops that are healthy also impacts the economic development of where we go out to eat and how the food prices rise.
Awesome, thank you. Does anyone else have any additional questions?
I just hope that we can keep in touch with you because I love what you're doing. And are you involved with the Rotaract?
So I'm in Rotary. I'm in the Raleigh Midtown Club.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't register that.
No, it's okay. Great. Yeah, so if you come to the social, I'll be there. I think this month in October.
Yeah, but I'm over 40. That's the problem.
Oh, you can still come.
Okay. Thank you.
Melissa, Catherine's the one that I was connecting you with when we were emailing back and forth about the Durham Rotaract Club.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Gian.
Oh, this makes sense now. Okay.
That's great. Okay, well, I'll meet you then. I'll come to that. I'll come to the Raleigh social.
Great.
I look forward to it.
Me too.
Awesome. Any other questions for Catherine?
Well, thank you guys for having me and letting me talk.
Well, thank you.